Hello everyone. This is a video on practice. 3 major points of practice and how the practice, a lot of practice, how the practice of these points ripples into the practice of your life. So these are the teachings that you can take in the yogic terminology off your mat. And this is why millions of people practice. Because when you practice a mixed mind-body art like yoga or Qigong, depending on how you practice it, of course, you have this opportunity. Many people practice these morning and night for this very reason. We can set a certain standard in the way that we show up. The 3 points of practice I'm going to talk about are body, energy, including breath and mind. There's a certain standard or a certain alignment of the body, a certain standard and flow of the emotions and the energy in the system, and a certain holding of the mind. Now, if an individual practices morning and night or practices one day, ideally they can install a kind of nervous system software or program in the mind body so that it perceives a certain way. It's of a certain level of consciousness through the practice, which is why they call them spiritual process or spiritual practice. Spiritual can be, in some ways, translated as conscious process. We attune the system to a certain level of consciousness, a certain level of awareness. And when practiced well, we can maintain that level of awareness from one practice to the next practice, creating that standard. Yeah? So there's these points of practice that I want to talk about because many individuals who go to yoga classes or even go to yogic trainings or Qigong trainings, they don't actually receive the teachings on these points of practice. And they're so foundational to actually moving beyond the base level of the mixed mind body arts. Now I'm speaking broadly about many arts, so there's something going to be lost in there, but I'm going to do my best to speak about some broad and general things, yeah? Because these arts start off at a very physical, fundamental, gross level, and they move into an ever more subtle practice. Now, many people don't actually make that leap. We have to contend with the fact that the individual who begins these practices of the internal arts, is not the same individual down the line. And this is true for everything, but there's a certain transformation of the mind and body that occurs. This is the progression. And in some sense, this doesn't matter because wherever you're at is right where you need to be. And there's a completion, there's a wholeness in that. And yet it's still a process. It's a never-ending, infinite, eternal process. But it's a process no less. And we do want to make progress, yeah? Do we not? For myself, I spent years practicing meditation and not really making progress. And yes, in some sense, there's nowhere to go, and that's fine. That was perfect for where I was at. But at the same time, it's so much nicer to make progress in the arts and to actually move forward in them. And so too, it's easier, my experiences, it's easier to actually experience the sensation of everything is as it is, and I'm willing to drop into the experience of this moment when I'm giving my all. And I can give my all more totally if I'm practicing the art in its fullness. So these are going to be some tools to help you to practice the mixed mind body arts in a much more full way. So speaking, as I mentioned, about the body, the energy, and the mind. We're going to start with the body. This is where most of these practices start, though some have teachings on yamas and niyamas, for example, in the yogic understanding of ethical and moral considerations or internal principles as well. But we're going to move into the physical just for the sake of this video, just to start somewhere, have brevity, you know? So body positioning, this is really important. This is a lot of what people are practicing in asana. They're aligning their system. The truth is, in some sense, we lose our center. We get so out of balance within ourselves, within our physical, because we have a center of gravity in the body, and it's down here in the lower abdomen. And most people are up here in the head. Now, we're not born like this, and the average child has a very anchored breath in the low belly. They breathe down into their belly, and they're very much in their center of gravity. They're very flexible, mobile, fast, unless there's some kind of childhood in which they were disabled from growing in a normal way, and that's a rabbit hole, but we won't go down there. So they're very anchored in their center of gravity. And then over time, we come up. We come up into the head. This is both a pointing towards being up in the mind as more of a concept or an ego identity that we're playing a role in, rather than being brought into our full embodiment. And it's really telling. It's really telling of the energies in the system, how we're no longer down here and present, and the system falls out of alignment when it's not anchored. We need a certain anchoring in of our systems so that we can hold it in the optimal way, because the system is meant to be held in a certain way. Now there's like certain principles that when one holds them in their body, they can move the body, for example, through all the many shapes, the asanas, but they can hold it in a way that they can still breathe optimally, efficiently, effectively. Because there's a certain way the mind and the body interact when there's a centering, a true centering. So the mind has to drop out of the body. We have to be able to drop out of the head. Now, it takes time to structure the body back into alignment, especially if an individual is constantly working on a computer or constantly driving. There's a certain momentum of energy that's pulling us out of alignment, and then we need a certain discipline to pull ourselves back into alignment. And this is most difficult to cultivate at first because we haven't trained the mind, and the mind goes on habit pattern conditioning, and we begin to fit in with the collective consciousness of what everyone else is doing, not holding their body in a proper alignment. Now, there's many pointings in different systems have different ways of holding the body. You'll hear different things like lock your joints, don't lock your joints, tuck your chin. How do you tuck your chin? What degree? How do you want to arrange the system? So I'm not going to go into that in great detail. But what happens when an individual holds these basic internal principles in the system, the nervous system learns its center, its set point, what it feels like to be in its center, which also feels good because the breathing is optimal. When we breathe optimally, we feel better. The hormones actually orchestrate better because the breathing system related to the nervous system, as well as the functioning of the glandular centers, the movement of blood, everything flows better, yeah? But we've lost our center, and we need to first develop with an effortful process the discipline of coming back to center again and again and again. Once we do this, the body will learn to always come back to center, not as an effortful process, but learning to ride a bike. At first hard, yeah? And then it's easy. This becomes the trained program of I'm out of center, body pulled back. Now, there's a way to hold the body, which is really important, that many people miss, and they practice yoga or other arts for years, and they don't get to the next levels because they're flexing their body and they're using their muscles. They're holding their body too tight. When we use too much muscular activation in mixed mind-body arts practices, such as yoga and Qigong, we don't get into the internals. This is the whole methodology of the internal arts, is to develop the internal aspects of the practice, to move consciousness ever more inward. Now, if we're contracting the large prime movers of the external body, there's a certain effort which is too much for meditation. But more importantly, the ideal way to hold the body is to stretch the whole body. So when you're doing this, say for example in a yoga asana or in standing Qigong, you can, for example, open your palm and you can feel a stretch. Now if you open it too much, it overstretches and it tightens muscles, yeah? Now we've constricted the subtle energy of Qi in the hand, not good. Not good for practice. But if we're just completely limp and flaccid, there's nothing there to hold the support. There's no function in there. We want the ideal middle ground of a quality of tension that stretches the fascia, but not so much that we're blocking off the subtle energy lines, and not too much limpness that there's no presence there. It's like active relaxation. Many or most, the arts, the arts are about relaxation. In Qigong, they call it song. It's translated perhaps as relaxation, perhaps as letting go, perhaps as release. There's not a lot of great translations. But it's this quality of conscious relaxation, you can think of it as. Because many think of relaxation, they think of watching TV. I'm relaxed. I'm fully letting go. But it's different in the internal arts. That's like completely flaccid. There's a quality of presence, of activation, but calm activation in the system. And individuals have to learn this because we don't naturally, in some sense, hold our body in this, or there's just a way of developing it that unless you're doing it as a conscious process, individuals don't get to. So coming back to the fascia stretch, we're holding that at a certain level of tautness is the word that comes to my mind. But it's not just in the palm of the hand. There's a certain way you can stretch the whole body in a static position. It doesn't matter if your arms are outstretched. I can stretch my body just by holding my body in a certain way. Now this is a kind of leap an individual has to make. And what happens when we hold our body like this over time is we learn to actually activate the fascia. And in the fascia, this connective tissue network is the nervous system. Much more integrated and woven through the fascial networks, yeah? They transmit a lot more subtle, sensitive messages. So an individual learns to disengage their major muscle groups, which is the habit pattern reaction for most individuals, it begins to drop into a more subtle level of their nervous system. So they hold this in certain asanas or postures such as standing meditation. And over time, what happens is the nervous system actually develops. The mind-body connection develops. I don't know if this is actually how it translates into the nervous system. I can only tell you experientially. But I would assume that the nerves become more well connected, maybe more myelinated with the myelin sheaths or whatever it is, the mechanisms at the level of the physical. They become more connected so an individual connects their mind and their body so they can feel more. They're like mapping the system for more sensitivity and awareness, more proprioception, more feedback. Not only that, they're connecting the different parts of their body as an integrated unit. Because if we get too much in the major muscle groups, they'll be the prime movers, and the large muscles will become so much larger and dominant that the smaller muscles won't be at play. When we learn to relax the whole system and develop the fascial networks, we can move the body with more flow as an integrated unit, like a dancer does, like a martial artist. There's a much more, I would say, intelligent way of orchestrating the movements in the system, and eventually the individual maps their entire body as one integrated unit. Now, in some sense, it is important to learn to contract the muscles, if only to relax them. That's like a step along this process. Yeah, we need to learn how to move the body with the major muscle groups to build their definition, and then to let them go. Because in the spiritual process, there's these steps, yeah? It's simultaneously a circle and a non-linear journey, but there's a linearity to it as well. And when we build the body stepwise like this, we learn to activate all the major muscles and then to relax them all. Because this is a mastery of the system, yeah? Capacity to create energy and to release energy back to the body. So we've mapped it all out, yeah? This is important. This sets us up for the foundation of the energy building and energy cultivation. This is where I'm going to move to next. So that's where we're at. we've spent a lot of time in asanas and standing meditation, and we've mind-body mapped our whole system. This will take some time. This will take breathing. This will take discharging of blocked energy from the system, because we hold block patterns of energy from limiting beliefs and unprocessed emotion and just ways we've held our body that are out of alignment where it's had to compensate in the past. So we restructure the body. Now we move on to the energetic realm. We kind of, in some way, work all these at once, but I'm going to teach it in kind of a stepwise way. So we move into the energetic, and I'm going to speak first about cultivating the Dantian and breathing. Now, ideally, when we do mixed mind-body arts practices, you'll hear different things, but if we're practicing them at a high level, generally, the breath is not touched at all. There's no regulation or control of the breath. Breath is coming in and out naturally. But most people don't start here. Most people don't start here. And for beginners, it is good, in my opinion, to use pranayama, to use guided breathing, to move through asanas. Inhale, hold the arms up. Exhale, bring the arms down, because this is the learning of the mind and the body to move as an integrated unit, to move the mind and the intention in coordination with the body. That takes some time. Eventually, once the whole mind and body have been mapped, and the major challenges in the breathing system, so the dysfunctional patterns in the breathing system, which are a result of the unprocessed emotion and previous trauma and other imbalances in the system, have been cleared out. This takes some work. This takes some pranayama. This takes some holding the body with different asanas and body positions or movement flows. Then we can begin to let the breath go. This is why it's so important to practice these systems in their wholeness. This is why it's important to practice meditation in conjunction with your physical asana practice, because we want to learn to meditate in the asana. That's its progression. That's its Pokemon evolved form. So the meditation in the asana, most individuals won't get very far in if they're not practicing meditation, yeah? Because we need to be able to hold the mind, which we're going to talk to later, but hold the breath. Hold the breath in a way where we're not controlling it. It's just coming in and out. And we develop a capacity to feel the whole body as an integrated unit and move the body in a way that it can still remain we're holding mindful presence on it. We're holding mindful presence, we're moving in an integrated unit, and we're feeling everything at once. So as we move into the more subtle practices, which typically we move slower and slower and less if we're going in the subtle direction, we can still be moving, but we don't need to do that coordination of inhaling with the arms up, exhaling with the arms down. Breath can just be coming in and out naturally. Now, we use the breath intelligently. Just like if you're running, most people, I find, go in this groove. You just run, your breath is coming in and out naturally. But if ever you want to ramp up the breath, sometimes you take some deeper breaths, or as you start running really fast, you notice you're building up with carbon dioxide, so you take some big breaths through the mouth to discharge the carbon dioxide. There's an intelligent way of working with the breath that if we're going to change the conditions of the system, we change the energetic foundation through the breathing process. So there's this balance that we begin to develop, this relationship with the breath, where we're working with it in an effortful way to change it consciously, and then we're allowing the breath to move naturally. And when we work between these two poles, we build an intelligence, not just a controlling intelligence, but also a listening intelligence. The more we can do this with our breath and energy, the more we can tap into the body. Because it's that same relationship. We want to be able to move the body consciously, but also listen to the body, to feel the afferent nerves as they bring the signals up to the brain, so that we have that sensitivity of feedback. Now, when we practice the arts in this way, we develop the yin and yang. We're more balanced in our practice, yeah? Now, I mentioned the three categories as being energy, and I'm saying breath is an aspect of energy. I want to speak about something more in the energy category here. And this is the cultivation of the lower dantian. Now, this is a terminology from Chinese medicine or alchemical Qigong. And dantian refers to elixir field, and in their teachings and understanding, there's three major ones, one in the lower abdominal area. There's different controversy over where exactly. Middle dantian, generally known to be in the heart. Once again, some people place it little different areas. And then the third dantian up in the head. Now, there's a process, and this is more or less sequential, that we develop the lower dantian. We don't at first have a dantian. We have to cultivate it. It's like a field of energy, a sea of qi. And we need to be able to bring into stabilize, develop presence, the energy in the lower centers here. Now, I'm using the Qigong terminology, and once you start working with the energy body, you would work with a system. There's different energy systems. So the three dantians is from Qigong, more specifically Neigong, the internal aspects of Qigong into Neidan. But the yogic understanding works with the chakra system and the 7 major chakras in the spine and the 114 chakras. Different energetic systems still will have different placement of chakras and energy centers. Once you work with the energetic practices, there's a whole realm of systems that you can develop, just as you can develop your body in different ways. You can be a bodybuilder. You can develop speed through Ironman, triathlons, and these things, yeah? So too, there's different ways of building the internal system. But in general, even in the yogic understanding and Qigong, those are the major two I'm going to talk about because those are the ones I practice. There's generally a process of developing the lower centers and lifting the energies up, cycling them too and opening up different energy pathways. But generally, there's some work done in the lower centers which allows the energies to move up. Mula Band and Uddiyana Band, Jalandhara Band. These are from the yogic understanding of energy locks, and we work with the fundamental energies of Muladhara and Svadhisthana, even Manipura, and we purify the nadis. There's this talk of purification. There's this talk of pumping the lower centers, breath of fire or Kapalabhati, and the purification that happens. The languaging on this in the alchemical Qigong understanding is the firing process, the internal alchemical process. The metaphor is ice melting into water, water turning into steam and rising up. So an individual, once they've moved into the energetic territory of these practices, goes on to a purification process, is one of the first ones. Learning to cultivate energy in the system, the internal system, guided through the breath, but other mechanisms of mind, its attention, and still more. And we learn to compress the lower centers, to gain a relationship at the level of the physical, pelvic floor and the lower abdomen. But we learn to hold our energies there in a kind of a mindful attention of the energy as we practice, as an internal principle. When we begin to bring in more prana, more chi, and we're actually able to cultivate it, so just breathing deep doesn't necessarily build the prana or chi in the system enough. There's a certain way to hold the body. And that's why I was mentioning internal principles before. They're not just how we hold the external body in proper alignment. There's ways of holding the internal musculature, which holds the internal fascia, which when we breathe helps to guide the breath through the internal and subtle channels. And as we begin to hold our awareness, like maintain a stabilized attention, which is something that's developed as we practice these, we can hold the energies and they build up in the lower centers, and they can build up to such a degree that they overflow in some sense, yeah? As they overflow, they create a different condition in the body. This might mean they overflow and other channels are filled with their energy. This may mean they overflow and enough energy is cultivated that it, in some sense, like compresses or condenses It builds up enough compressive force that it energetically affects the physical. It's helping to purify the body. This may be experienced as an actual compression of the abdomen. The contraction of the abdomen and then consequent release is like a pump. And it's pumping the physical body because in your digestive system, you have all your cells, yeah? And all your cells, then there's all this debris because your body is always going through detoxification. It's bringing nutrients into the cells and it's taking out waste. Now, it does this through a series of pumps with the lymphatic system and the circulation, movement of cellular material, small molecules in and out of the cell through small little pumps, sodium ion pumps, yeah? Remember this stuff from physiology of the cell? So it's all these pumps. And when we begin to work with the subtle energy, which is the foundational blueprint behind the physical, we begin to become more effective at pumping the cells consciously. And this speeds up that process of clearing out the waste products and bringing in the positive, nutritious stuff from the blood, etc. This begins to cleanse and purify the body, not only purifying the physical body, but purifying the emotions, releasing unprocessed emotion that's built up in the system, and even clearing limiting beliefs. Because as a process, we're bringing in an intelligent form of life force energy, which is imbuing a quality of consciousness, intelligent consciousness into the system. This is our consciousness or spiritual evolution. There are many lines of evolution. Our spiritual evolution is us being able to take in more consciousness, more intelligence, more life force energy, store it in the system, and have it rewrite the coding of our system. So we develop what's known as the lower Dantian through certain practices, certain internal energetic principles, or we do purification process through Nadi Shodhana, breath holds. There are many different ways of doing the initial purification process and continuing to do that. And this is important to do with the body, because if you don't have the wetsuit, the fascia all mapped out in the body, you don't have the energetic system built. So there's a ceiling for your practice, yeah? If you just cultivate all this energy, unless you're specifically just going to cultivate the central channel or you work with a system that has a different way of doing it, my understanding is, or my opinion is, it's good to build the physical system, because there are spiritual systems that just go for meditation. They go right to meditation. They go right to mind, right to spirit. The way that I've been taught in yogic and Qigong understanding is, yes, we're going there and we're doing that work as well, but start with the physical. There are many meditators who are quite unhealthy because they just practice meditation and they don't take really good care of their body to optimize it. The understanding in the Qigong and the yogic understanding there is cultivate the body as well. This will allow individuals to stabilize these states in a much more effective way. Their body becomes much more efficient. They can maintain meditation for much longer periods. So developing the body, starting with the alignments, building the fascia, building the energetic systems, going through the purification process, this begins to give us more and more access to the subtle body. We begin to open up more and more energy channels. They come into potentiation. And then we want to work with the mind. So there's much more to go in the energetic process, but I'm just going to describe it till there. Now we want a certain quality of mind, and one of the qualities is equanimity. Equanimity means equal parts positive and negative. This helps us to counteract deep conditionings of the mind, to be prone to orient towards pleasure and to avoid discomfort. This prevents us from practicing at a deep level, because so long as we have this habit pattern reaction built in the system, we won't enter the deep parts of ourselves. Because as soon as we begin to come into discomfort, consciousness will come up. It will avoid that and it'll come to the surface. This is why many people stay on the surface of their practice. They stay in the physical, they stay in their muscles, and they don't go deep within themselves, mostly because they weren't taught that way and they're just practicing at yoga studios or whatever else is coming up, that they're not guided in this very specific way because most people don't have this understanding or haven't gone through this process, so they can't really share much about it. So we want the mind in equanimity. We want it to be not running away, so that way we can be present for whatever's happening in the body. We can have a stability of the mind, because equanimity as a quality of mind is not emotion in some sense. Emotions can still go high and low, just like pain and pleasure. But when we have an equanimous mind, there's a stability to be present for the high and low. Whereas the habit pattern reaction for many people is to begin to disconnect from the body in subtle and gross ways instead of feeling. So when an individual puts in the hours of practice, they're saying, yes, I'm willing to be present. I'm willing to show up. I'm practicing morning and night, regardless of the conditions. Some meditation's good, some are in my head, discomfort some days. I'm going to continue to move forward. I'm going to continue to be present. This cultivates a mind that is present. Cultivates a mind that is able to soak itself into the body. This is why meditation is so important, because it takes time for the mind to soak in the body. You can move the body into stillness quite quickly. But just because you do that doesn't mean your mind will stop moving. It'll keep thinking if you have a lot of momentum behind thinking. But you can stop thinking and practice no mind for long periods of time as you learn to sink the energy, the chi that is often stored in people's head, back into the center of gravity. You learn to do this by holding the body in a certain way. This is why the proper physical alignments of the system and a well-taught teacher who can teach these things is able to guide an individual to do that, because once you set up the body in a certain way, the energetic conditions will follow if you hold them for long enough. This is why Hatha and many Qigong systems just start with standing. Because many people need to learn to be still, to still their mind in order to move from that stillness. Otherwise, they're just moving through the practice like they move through everything else in life, which is not from their center. So we want to continually learn to move from our center so that when we're in motion, we're anchored in our center. And the center has many levels. It's the physical center of gravity, but it's also the center of an equanimous mind, not running to the positive or the negative. And it also refers to the anchoring of our consciousness integrated with our wholeness, our soul and our spirit at the deeper level, but I'm not going to touch on that in this video. I would also offer that we want to hold the mind in mindful and loving awareness. So mind is mindful. It's full. The mind is full of the body. It's present in the whole system. I mentioned that many people are up here. Many people are up here and they experience just here. When an individual has gone through this process of mapping the whole fascial networks and dropping the awareness through the body, the consciousness, the breath, and they built the internals, even if they're thinking, they can still be embodied. They can be an embodied thinker and not a discarnate mind. Yeah? So then when an individual has the stability of mind and they've built some level of their energetics, what happens is they can practice asana, they can practice Qigong at an energetic or subtle level. So they're no longer just in the physical body. They're moving subtle energies through their system while simultaneously practicing, and maybe moving the body in concert with the subtle energetics to circulate them through the different subtle energy lines, opening them up or just guiding energy through them for purifications or continued purgation, tonification, or guiding positive energy in, and balancing of the energies. Yeah? So then the practice moves into the energetic domain from that physical standpoint, from the physical part. And this is why I mentioned the individual who starts the process is not the one who finishes, or eternally, you don't really finish, but who, you see yourself at different points in the journey, want to be able to progress to these. Now, as I mentioned, most people don't get to the subtle energetics. It doesn't actually take that long. I've been practicing for a long time. It took me a long time to get there, but not because it should have taken me in some sense. I needed to go through it, but it could have taken me a much shorter time if I had received the teachings, had a good teacher, and went through it in a stepwise manner and had the discipline to just go for it. So that's part of the reason why I'm sharing this, is I want to offer out there that there is a process here, and I've articulated it with, I don't know, you tell me if it's enough clarity that you have an understanding of this process. There's obviously so many more details, and there's a ceiling that continues to get higher and higher as I understand it. And as I become more developed in my own practice, it's one of those things, yeah? The more I know, the more I know I don't know, and the more that I'm capable of perceiving just how expansive these arts are, yeah? It's humbling, because I practice for multiple hours a day, and I've practiced for years, and the ceiling that I'll hit is like the floor of a 100-story building for some of the other people who practice these things, because my few hours a day can never contend with an individual who's not chosen to have a family, who lives in an ashram and practices these in a kind of uninterrupted flow. But in some sense, I shouldn't put myself down in a belief way like that. I can practice these continually regardless of my conditions, but there are certain heights in certain lines of development I won't reach, but I'll reach other heights in different lines of development, which will be more representative of the themes that I chose to explore in this life. So it's not like that's better than this, but just know that these arts go really high, yeah? So 3 foundational points of practice: your body, your energy, and your mind. As you go into any asana, and this is teachings for day-to-day life, if you're in an elevator, if you're in your car, if you can come back to these points, this will also help you to align your system in a good way. How is the body positioned? How are the basic alignments? Can you hold your body in that very efficient way of not too much effort, not too much ease? Now, globally, we want to do this, but different parts of the body will typically have different levels of contraction depending on where we hold stress and ease. We want to be able to hold the body in a beautiful way so that we feel good, because it's the most efficient and effective way. Our energy, we want to have some awareness of where the energies are. Till an individual comes out of their head, which they may be in their head for the better part of their life, they don't really understand what it's like to be in the body for a prolonged period in a developed way. But once we learn where the energies are in our body, we can begin to become more intelligent at moving them out. Oh, I'm up in my head. Well, why don't I just massage my body, and I'll make a greater connection with my heart and with my body. Oh, I'm so much more present, and my thinking is beginning to slow down. I'm more regulated. This feels good. The more I'm in feeling, the less I'm in thinking. Oh yeah, this is really easy stuff. I have all the tools within me. Yeah, so it's like this process, and then we can work with our breath in this way. Regulated breath at times where we're, I need to discharge some energy. Now I want to relax. I'm just going to relax my breathing. I'm not going to touch it. Just going to allow everything to be as it is. It's going to keep my mind in equanimity. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching this video. If you have